Hello, and welcome to an all new episode of the Transfix Take Podcast, where each week we deliver news, insights, and trends for shippers and carriers. It's the week of May 15th. I'm Jenny Ruiz, and of course, I'm joined by none other than our market expert, Justin Mays. Mays, how are you doing?
I'm doing good as of now, Jenny. But we're just kicking off DOT week, as you're going to mention.
Yep.
And it's a little gloomy in Atlanta, but I'm hoping for a pretty good week.
I'm hoping for the same. We're literally, like you said, a few hours in. So, and as you noted last week in Fast Freight Friday, we did experience a slim decline from May 6th through the 13th overall with some breakout regions. So if you could help us understand where we are nationally and, any early glimpses to DOT week that you have, we'll take.
Yeah, definitely. We're seeing a very similar trend to what we saw in 2023.
Okay.
Since Friday on the 10th to today, Tuesday, we still have seen about a 5-cent increase on the national average rate per mile line haul. But it's primarily driven by very specific regions out in the West Coast and Southeast, which we'll get into soon. Additionally, we've started to see tender rejections increase. We started last week below 3%, and over the last 5 days, we've actually seen tender rejections grow up to about 3.6%. Still
Okay.
very low compared to the pandemic years,
True.
but definitely a signal that, we may see some volatility over the next 3 days.
That said, you know what? It's time for the regional breakdown. Now, it's important to note that 100% of markets in the Midwest saw declines this week, and over a 7-day period, rates dipped near 1%. It looks like this may be one of the few regions that won't see any gains this week, but what do you think, Maze?
So I think we will still see very slim gains in the Midwest, but it's going to be in very specific markets, probably the higher volume markets. The most impactful part of DOT week is generally Wednesday. It's right in smack dab in the middle of the 72 hours.
Yeah.
But outside of that, I think we're going to recover pretty fast out of the Midwest going into next week to see rates go back to where they are today pretty rapidly.
Okay. Now over in the Northeast, Philly was the big breakout market, seeing a 0.33% increase in rates. One thing to note is that last year during DOT week, rates on loads going from the Northeast to the Midwest spiked. Do you think that'll happen this time around, given the trend?
We're still going to see that just because it's an undesirable region going to an undesirable region, though I
Yeah.
don't think that we're going to see such significant impacts to rates overall throughout the country, especially not in the Midwest and Northeast this year compared to 2023.
Okay. Now, the coastal region continues to see gains this week. In most markets, we're creeping towards that 1% mark of rate increases over the last week, especially in the long haul and cross country category. Now, since this is a big interstate region, should we expect to see bigger gains this week in rates?
I definitely think we're going to continue to see gains in the coastal region, especially when you look at the Southeast, which we're going to get into soon. But the rates in the Southeast are starting to rapidly increase, especially in Florida and Georgia, and it's going to continue to creep its way up to the Carolinas. So I would expect this to continue over the next couple weeks. It's going to intensify over the next 72 hours. Then, start seeing a slim decrease, but the overall trend over the next couple weeks will be up to the right.
All right, we love up to the right for carriers. Shipper is a different story, but the West Coast is back on the rate gains train with just about every market, including Ontario, Stockton, and Phoenix, seeing momentum. Now, you note the southern part of this region being the tightest. What should we expect out of the West this week?
Yeah, this trend is going to continue. Shippers are going to have difficulty in Southern California, parts of Arizona. These are high volume markets that drive up the national average as well, especially in Southern California. On the flip side, the northern part of the West region is loosening, up in Washington and Oregon. But like I said, the majority of the volume coming out of the West Coast is coming out of the southern part. This is going to be intensified, obviously, by DOT week. But just overall, this is the seasonality that we would anticipate rates to continue to increase in these areas.
You teed us up really nicely. The South actually saw minimal movement this week, with rates actually decreasing 0.18%, which is not a lot, but my guess is this will change given the 72-hour blitz through the weekend, especially. I should also note that city and local runs experience quite a big hike in rates, nearly 4%. What is your outlook on the South?
Yeah, I think it's going to happen exactly how you kind of outlined it. We're going to see some, tightness through this week. After this week, though, the South region isn't generally a region that tightens too much in the month of May and June.
Okay.
But everything can be thrown in kind of a spiral, especially with imports to Mexico being on the rise. There's long waits out on, the imports from Mexico, kind of like there were on the west coast of the U.S. throughout the pandemic. That's a lot of freight that is most likely destined to come into the U.S. Some of it's going to be by truckload, which could actually bring some tightening capacity in the markets in the state of Texas, especially.
Oof, we will certainly see that, especially over the next couple of weeks with Memorial Day weekend. What, just 2 weeks away, if you can believe it already. And then, of course, it is red, red, red in the Southeast. In just the last 7 days, we saw just over a 2% increase. And then over the last 60 days, just about a 5% increase, all thanks to seasonality in states like Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi, as they're in the height of their produce season. What is going to happen in the Southeast this week? I feel like this is the big one to watch.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The Southeast, regardless of DOT week, this is its tightened capacity season. Produce, it's the time of the year where the Southeast really thrives for carriers. DOT is only going to continue to intensify that through this week. But even as we come out of DOT week, it's not like the markets are going to become loosened again, especially in Florida and Georgia. We're going to continue to see some issues for shippers down there, but it's going to be, in light for carriers. Now, freight going there this week may be the only opportunity where shippers don't see rates increase, especially if it's coming from the Midwest and the Northeast. I would think that's the only lane that we may not actually see an increase in rates at an average level, because rates coming out of Southeast is in extreme favorability for carriers right now.
Yeah. It's funny because one thing that I forgot to note was the tornado that was happening, I want to say in the Midwest, Southeast-ish area. And it seemed like that, had no effect on sort of the market, but it just goes to show that capacity is still, tell me if I'm wrong, at an all-time high where we're not seeing those big effects. Or maybe we're just resilient and we know what to do at this point.
Yeah, I think it's more capacity. It's extremely loose still. I mean, just look at tender rejections. We saw an increase of, 0.6% essentially, but we're still below 4%, which is an extremely low level for shippers to experience through DOT week. And I don't see it getting much worse over the 72 hours.
All right. I believe you. I do. Now, I think we should move into this one section because it kind of caught me by surprise. But earlier this year, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy signed a law that required heavy duty truck owners to carry a minimum of $1.5 million in liability insurance for every truck in case of, quote, injury or death of one or more persons in any one accident, or for damage to property in any one accident, end quote. This law goes into effect on July 1st, just a few weeks away. And it's also important to note that the federal minimum requirement is $750,000, which is quite a significant jump when you look at Jersey and what their new requirement is. So my question for you, May, is how do you think this is going to affect the industry, especially for small owner-operators and small carriers?
Yeah, I mean, the law itself, specific to New Jersey, it's still difficult to tell because the law is not super clear. If it's just interstate, a lot of, states do have the IRP, which allows you to share your registration by state. So a truck can be registered in three different, they're paying their registration into 3 different states. That could include New Jersey. Does that count? Does it not count? It gets pretty complex. But at the end of the day, this is a larger change for the industry as a whole, because if this trend continues, as you called out, it's going to hurt the owner operators and mid-sized carriers the most. They're already going through pain right now. Insurance rates have already continued to increase over the last couple of years. This is only going to drive them higher right now.
Oof, I guess we will see what the effects are come July, maybe into the summer or through the end of the summer. We shall see. But that said, don't forget to check out our Transfix LinkedIn page for this week's installment of Fast Freight Friday, hosted by Justin Mays. And then with that, we'll see you next week with an all-new episode of the Transfix Take Podcast. Until then, drive safely, pay attention. Again, pre- and post-trips, super important this week. I mean, every day, but also this week.
Definitely.